All right, good morning everybody, and welcome to what's going to be our last kind of big webinar of the year, and then tomorrow we'll do our last app webinar of the school year. And thinking about topics and what we wanted to do, what I had thought was maybe to wind down the year, we can talk about what should be going on to plan for assistive technology success for next year. So the way I've kind of broken this down is thinking about different stakeholders, what they can do to get ready for a successful year with assistive technology next school year. So the first thing you need to do, I mean, you're at the year's end, school's almost out, so first you need to just take a deep breath and say, we made it, we're done with this year, and think about next year as a chance to start fresh. What you really should start by doing is kind of reflecting on what went well and what could be better. What students using assistive technology, were we considering it correctly? What went well throughout the school year this year? And then where did we struggle? Did we run into issues with technology not working, with kids abandoning for whatever reason? What happened that didn't go well? And then what steps can we take to make that go a little bit better this year? And then really what you want to do, the key to having a successful year is to start planning now and get a plan in place to make this happen, to make the assistive technology rollout happen well, to make follow-up happen, and to make sure that any of your students that need assistive technology are getting what they need and are using it in the classroom effectively. This is a little chart that I want to show. And this is something that can kind of get people, give people a visual of where assistive technology should fit with a student. If you look here, this is put out by the Don Johnson Company. They've got the grade level in school across the bottom. They've got the grade level achievement across the side here, and it says getting the grade level performance is the title of this chart. And you can see you've got kind of a line here that for the no support. If you're giving students with disabilities, if you're not giving them support, you can see they're not as far off the line until they get to about fifth grade, sixth grade, and then it starts to drift a little bit further away, and there's a big gap here with no support between what happens in 12th grade or the high school and grade level performance. With interventions that can be done, there's data has been shown that you can get a little bit closer, but there's still a big gap. And that gap is where assistive technology and services need to be kind of fit into what's going on here. So what we want, the idea here, and as you can see with this too, what this shows is that assistive technology isn't used kind of quite as broadly in first through fourth grade, but when you start to get to fifth and on, we start to see lots of areas where, or we start to see a big gap and a lot of opportunity for assistive technology to fit in there. What I want you to keep in mind too is that assistive technology, in the definition sense, is it's supposed to be used by kids that are struggling to reach their IEP goals. So that really should be kind of the first tipping point there for whether or not a student should be using assistive technology. If they are not meeting their IEP goals, that's when we should start looking at assistive technology for them. So what I want to look at this based on today is based on what can administrators do to plan for a better year next year, what can teachers do, what can AT professionals do, what can parents do, and what can students do. And even though this thing breaks down kind of along these lines, some of the things that the administrator is doing is also things that a teacher could do. Same with AT professional. These groups all have to work together to ensure success. So even though it's listed under one category, it might be things that other folks might be able to do as well to make sure that things are going successfully in school. Really, the administrator, though, is the key to success. Where we see successful schools using assistive technology, it's because the administrator understands what needs to be done. The administrator is a person that believes in assistive technology. The administrator understands kind of the process and understands what needs to go into being able to use assistive technology successfully. And they promote the use in the school. They push the teachers to use it. They check in on the teachers that are using it. They encourage students. They don't mind spending the money on this thing. So the administrator is really the first area that we have to hit. That's a key to a successful implementation of an assistive technology plan. So what can administrators do? Well, the first thing they need to do is kind of check in with their AEA AT team and figure out if there's a policy for obtaining assistive technology from this team. What needs to happen? Is it that first the teachers have to suggest something, first the teachers have to evaluate a student, and then if they can't figure out what that student needs, then they bring in the AT team? Is there a form that needs to be filled out? Familiarize yourself with the process that goes on in your AEA, and just understand what needs to be done when a student's identified as needing assistive technology. And that's a big thing to do. Identify what needs to happen so that you can do things in a timely manner when you run into a student that needs assistive technology. You also might want to find out from this AT person what's available in a lending library. What can be taken out on loan? What's the policy on the lending library? What's available? How can the school benefit from what might be available in a lending library in the AEA? That's also another important thing to look at. And that can happen when you make contact with the AEA AT team member in your area to begin dialogue for next year. Really, a lot of AT teams or AEAs are broken down to AT teams, and I know, speaking of Grant Wood, I believe there's 10 people on the Grant Wood AEA AT team, and those 10 people are kind of stationed geographically. They each deal with different areas. So you want to know who the person for your area is. Get in touch with them, make contact, tell them that you're looking to plan for next year, see where they can help. But just knowing a name and knowing somebody that you can go to when you do have an issue next year is an important piece. And keeping up with this AT team is important too, because it could change. So you want to know who's assigned to your area for next year. The next big thing, maybe the biggest area that you can kind of get ready if you're an administrator, and this goes for just about anybody as well, is understanding the consideration process. As we know from webinars we've done before and just in general, that IDEA mandates that assistive technology has to be considered on every IEP. It doesn't have to be included on every IEP, but we need to consider it on every IEP. And we've talked about this before, but I'm going to show you right now. There's a form that is been put together by a group of assistive technology folks in the state called the Assistive Technology Liaisons Group. There's a form that really ought to be used for consideration, and this is going to help you arrive at what tool a student needs to be using in the classroom. A student that's struggling might need to be using, and it breaks things down really nicely for you. If you look across the top, it's got the information about the student, and then as we head a little bit more toward the middle, it really asks us, select the instructional or access areas in which the student is experiencing difficulty completing daily task goals or benchmarks. So there we get to that point of, is the student struggling doing what they're supposed to do and are supposed to be able to do based on the IEP. And you would go through those consideration areas and circle yes or no if they're having problems with that. And there's things like written expression, spelling, reading, math. There's lots of different areas located in that. If you do say that yes, they're struggling in one of those areas, it asks you to then identify the IEP goal. And once you've identified the IEP goal, then you have to circle one of the 3 boxes that's listed there as the student's needs are being met without AT, they don't need it. The student's needs are being met with AT, let's write it into the IEP, or AT concerns continue to exist. And then let's evaluate the student, the environment that the student's in, the tasks the students have to do, and then you'll be able to come up with tools that the student needs. So this is really the key thing for any IEP meeting for assistive technology, is to be able to utilize this particular sheet as the consideration piece. And we did a whole webinar on consideration if you want to watch more about that, but this is something that you need to be familiar with. This is located on the Department of Education's website. If you go to educateiowa.gov and then go to the assistive technology page, about halfway down the page you'll see a link to consideration, and that's got this listed here. This is also listed, I think this is also linked on our webinars page on the education.uiowa.edu/icater, and then the webinars tab. I think you can also get access to this. What's nice about this as well is the second part of this page gives you ideas of what assistive technology might be used for some of these students. And it's really difficult to see on here, but it doesn't give you product names. It's important to know types of assistive technology, not necessarily product names. And you can see here what the names, the types of things it gives you. It goes in an order of the continuum from low tech to mid tech to high-tech solutions. So just as an example here for reading, if a student is struggling in reading, this is going to give you ideas that they could use, like a book adapted for access, low-tech modifications to text, handheld devices to read individual words, use of pictures or symbols with text, electronic text, modified text, a text reader, a scanner with an OCR and a text reader, or a text reader with study skill support. So you can see that goes from real low-tech things to higher tech ideas. It gives you an idea what that student might need. The next step would be evaluating that student for a particular type of tool, that they're a particular product name that they might need. And that's where you might bring in that AT team to find out what particular tools they might need, what particular tools are available in the lending library for trial as well. So getting familiar with the consideration guide is key. You know, as the year winds down, another thing administrators should do, and AT professionals can help out with this too, is inventory the AT in the school. There's probably already AT in the school. What you need to do is know what you have, know what's available, and keep that inventory so that if you have a student that they say, hey, we need Read and Write Gold for this student, you don't have to go out and buy it because maybe you already have it. Know where it is, know what computer it's located on, know what you've got, and know what version you have too. It's important to keep up to date on whether or not the version you have is going to work with the technology that you have. So you need to know what version you've got as well. Also, if you've got physical tools, physical AT tools, you know, a joystick mouse, a communication, an AAC communication device, anything that's a hardware tool. Now is a great time to clean that up a little bit. I mean, it sounds simple, but just cleaning it up and making it look nice for the next student to use it could be a real powerful thing to do, and could be the difference between a student using it or not. You should also identify students who are using AT. Find out who's using AT and what they're using, and document that. As we saw in the consideration guide, if AT is being used by a student, that needs to be documented in the IEP so that it continues being used next year, especially if it's already something you've got. Just identify who's using it and what they're doing. Then, as school winds down and as you begin to know what students are going to be in what class next year, then it's time to take that list of students that are currently using assistive technology and alert their future teacher that they're using it, and alert them of what they're using so that they're prepared to work with a student that is using assistive technology, and so that if they need to over the summer, they can get the proper training. They can explore a little bit about the assistive technology that those students might be using in the next school year. So those are all, they seem simple, but they're really important things to do to get ready to have a successful year next year. The next thing that you want to do is you do need to become familiar with AIM, and that's Accessible Instructional Materials and their requirements. So any student that can't access a standard textbook, whether they can't turn the pages, they can't visually see the text, they have a learning disability, they need to be provided with what's considered accessible instructional materials. So materials in a format that they can utilize, and that needs to be given to them in a timely manner. And the definition of timely manner is when everybody else gets those things. So at day one of the school year, they need to be given that accessible instructional material. If you are not familiar, if you haven't done much with accessible instructional materials, if you go to aim.cas.org, that is going to show you, it's going to give you a lot of good information on accessible instructional materials. I'm going to just open up, I'll share this internet site with you here, and we'll take a look at AIM real quick. That's aim.cas.org. CAS is the Center for Applied Special Technologies, and you can see here this is the National Center on Accessible Instructional Materials. This gives you everything you need to know. If you look over here, there's resources for families, teachers, agencies, developers of NIMAS file sheets, producers of AIM. You can find out, there's an AIM navigator here. This helps you kind of figure out, walk through the decision making necessary to get students that accessible instructional material. You got AIM in your state, but you find out what your state is doing. If we click on this, we'll take a quick look at what Iowa is doing. It should take us to a website. It takes us to the website for the state, educateiowa.gov. However, there's also there's a piece to that website. We go there, I believe, called Iowa's True AIM. I'm going to plug in True AIM into the search bar here, True AIM, and we should get linked to that. So here's through that Iowa website. There's a Iowa guide for accessible instructional materials. Also, it's called Iowa's True AIM, and it tells us, gives us a lot about what needs to be done for students that need accessible instructional materials. It lays out what these accessible instructional materials are, what the legal requirements are, who's eligible, how to get them. So those are two important websites to kind of take a look at over the summer, get ready for next year. The aim.cas.org and Iowa's True AIM, and those will both give some very good resources on accessible instructional materials, so that that your staff and yourself will be more aware of what needs to be done for students that struggle with accessing standard materials in the classroom. So being familiar, that's one of the biggest areas that administrators can make a difference. That's also one of the biggest areas that schools can get in trouble for with not following, is making sure that students have those materials in a format that they need when everybody else gets them. So once you become familiar with this, it's also important that you make over the summer, even earlier, even now, it's time to start making the necessary requests for AIM. So what I mean by that is, if you have a student that needs, that you're using a textbook, you know what you're using, and they need that textbook in an alternative format for next year, usually the people that would access that for them in Iowa are the folks at the Department for the Blind, and they need to know well in advance what needs to be done, what book needs to be turned into what format, so that they can get that done in time for the school year. So even if you know now is a good time to start making requests for accessible instructional materials, and you can find out how to do that through that educateiowa.gov website, that Iowa's True AIM website, part of educateiowa.gov. That'll give you the forms that you need. It'll direct you to people you need to be directed to be able to make requests for that accessible instructional materials. So the earlier you can make those requests, the more likely you're going to have it on day one of the school year, which is when you need it for the students that need that format, so that they have it in a timely manner. Another thing you might want to look into is you want to start learning about Bookshare. Bookshare is another thing that the school should be signed up for, and that website, and we'll show you that. We'll share that one with you and show it to you quickly, is bookshare.org. If we go to bookshare.org, what Bookshare is a way to get some accessible instructional materials. Not bookshare.com, bookshare.org. Sorry about that. Can't talk and type at the same time. Bookshare.org. So what Bookshare is a group that has taken and created several 193,000 books in an accessible format. And what can happen here is, if we look here, if you look at Getting Started, and you go to the overview, or actually what we should look for is the membership, and the membership overview, schools can sign up for a membership in Bookshare. So schools can sign up for this membership. We look at membership options. Organizational options are schools. If we hit the organizational membership, you can see down here, U.S. schools, U.S. K-12 schools can get free memberships to Bookshare. And then what you would do is you would sign up your students that are eligible, and you can see what the eligibility list is here. If we go back up to membership and we go to qualifications, If you have students that physically can't access a book, that have a visual impairment, or that have a learning disability that is verified by a neurologist, psychiatrist, learning disability specialist, special ed teacher, school psych, clinical psych, or doctor, you can then have those students signed up for Bookshare, and they can download text for free in a format that's going to benefit them. So then they can download this digital text. They can also download a reader and have that text read out loud to them. So it's really important, and this is a free tool. It's very quick to use. They get the tools that they need. They get the books they need quickly, and it's very important that schools sign up for this. I know Iowa's a pretty large user of Bookshare, but not every school in the state's using this. So if you aren't using it, now is a great time to sign up for Bookshare, learn about the qualifications, and get students that would need books signed up through this so they can start utilizing this, hit the ground running on day one of the school year. So knowing the consideration process, knowing the AIM issues, and knowing about what resources are available are all important things for administrators to do to get ready for next year. The other thing you need to do is when students are using assistive technology, to be able to use it successfully and to know that it's being used successfully, we need to collect data. So you need to try and, it's a good thing to do for success for next year to start developing a data collection procedure. And what you want to do when you do this is you want to collect data both with and without the intervention. So you want to find out, let's say you're using a word prediction tool for a student to be able to write a little bit quicker. First you want to take data without them using that word prediction software. Then you want to take data with them using that. You want to continue taking data as they progress using that to show that that's a tool that's helping them. The things you want to look at, the things you want to measure when you're collecting data, you want to measure things like the time a student spends on task. Are they spending more time on a task without the AT? Is the AT cutting down on the time that they need to spend? Mistakes, if you go back to that word prediction idea, you want to take into account spelling mistakes before the intervention, spelling mistakes after the intervention. If you're doing something with reading, you want to measure comprehension. A good thing to look at there is the PAR assessment. That'll help you kind of figure out who needs to use, who could benefit from accessible instructional materials, and that PAR assessment can be found on donjohnston.com. That's DonJohnston.com. Also, you want to look at student preference. When you start talking to a student about using AT, you want to not only just have the hard numbers in there, but you want to also find out if the student likes using that tool. If it's something they're not going to like using, they're probably not going to do it, and maybe you want to start looking for something else as well. So developing data collection procedures, having a format that teachers can dive in and do that in would be real helpful to have that going right at the beginning of the year so that we can see how a student's doing without the AT, followed by how a student's doing with the AT, and see if that intervention that we're trying to incorporate really is a good intervention, or if we need to look at something else for the student. Another thing that administrators can do is at this point is they can begin a dialogue with IT folks to ensure that the AT is able to work on the network. So an administrator kind of knows what needs to be done. They know what assistive technology they need to have, what assistive technology is being used in the classroom. They need to make sure it's working properly. That's one of the big issues that we find at schools is that assistive technology just isn't working properly on a network because maybe an IT guy doesn't really know what it is and isn't aware of what they need to plug in there. So the administrator needs to start a dialogue with the IT folks and discuss with them why the administrator is suggesting putting certain assistive technology on computers, find out what would be the best area to put these things, describe what the AT does so the IT professional has a good idea of what it does, why it's needed on the network, what the IT person is going to need to do to make it run successfully on the network, and they can provide ideas of where they might want to load that up. If it's one or two tools that they might have an idea of, this reading software might work better in this quiet environment here, let's load it up on this computer over here so a student can use it. But making sure that that the IT folks are aware of the AT that's going to be being used. Make sure that they're aware of issues that might have already arisen, and working with them to ensure that things are working for the first day of school is real important. So getting that conversation going at this point is a good thing for administrators to do as well. And I think this is the last kind of finally what administrators can do is, I know right now they're starting to plan some of their initial pre-service teacher workday topics for the next school year. It certainly doesn't hurt to include some assistive technology topics in the school professional development plan. So, as we mentioned that it's important for administrators to understand consideration, it's important for all teachers to understand that. So maybe working consideration into your, preschool professional development days might be something that could happen. Introducing the tools that you're going to be using into this school, so that everybody can kind of see how they work, see what they do, and understand what's available. That could be an effective professional development thing, and it doesn't have to be all day. It could be part of the initial professional development before school starts. So we're just introducing the idea of assistive technology to teachers, allowing them to see what you have, allowing them to see what some of these tools do is important. And then also talking about AIM, accessible instructional materials, and the importance of knowing what you're going to be reading and being able to obtain that in an accessible format in a timely manner. Just even discussing that much about AIM is important. And if you get into Bookshare, showing teachers how Bookshare works so that they can download their own books for students, that would be helpful as well. So if we can add this assistive technology idea and talk about consideration and AIM and the tools you have in your school into the professional development plan at the beginning of the year, that's going to be great. So start planning for that now, and then that can be an effective option when school starts. Well, how about a teacher? What are the teacher's roles in AT? Well, if we break it down real simply, what the teacher needs to do is typically, at least in Iowa, a teacher is kind of the first line of defense. They need to identify a student that might need some tools, because we don't have AT professionals in every school. So a teacher is the first person to say, this kid's struggling reaching their IEP goals. What can we do? Maybe we need to look at assistive technology. So they have to look at that first. The teacher also implements the tools in the IEP in the classroom to help meet those IEP goals. So the teacher has to be aware of how these tools work, because they're the ones that are using them in the classroom. Also, they're the ones that are going to be doing some of the data collection on AT used on the students, so they need to know what they're looking for in that respect. So what can teachers do? Well, the first thing a teacher can do, and this is going to be something that can help the future teacher as we're winding down the school year, maybe an administrator could help do this as well, is what you need to do is you need to document what the students are currently doing to help that teacher next year. So if you can take some data to show what the students are using, take pictures of the way that you have things set up. Maybe we're working with a student that needs a switch, and there's a switch mount that sets up the switch in a position that the student can benefit from that. Get out a camera, take some pictures of that, get that into the IEP so that we can see the next teacher, the next user can see exactly how that switch needs to be set up for success. Videotape students using assistive technology for reference. If you can capture on video the student using some AT successfully, you can get a big picture of what needs to be done. You can get the idea of the setup, the tools they're using, the prompts they're getting, the environment they're in, exactly what needs to be done to be using things successfully, and showing how a student uses AT. That can be invaluable for the teacher for next year. So being able to create these reference points, and then if you're a teacher that's getting these students coming in, viewing these reference points to be able to kind of see what needs to be done for the student helps you hit the ground running. And that's kind of been the theme of this whole presentation, is what can we do to just get the ball rolling and hit the ground running at the beginning of the school year. So documenting things with data, with pictures, with video, and then if you are using something successfully, getting the name of that tool into the IEP so that carries on into the next year, that's important as well. For example, in the initial, maybe in the student's initial IEP meeting, they had been working on something and you figured the student needed a text reader for reading. And so in the IEP it says You know, Johnny's going to use a text reader to do in-class readings. Well, then once you do the evaluation, you found out that Kurzweil works best for that student. By the end of the year here, what needs to be done is Kurzweil, the name, needs to be added into the IEP, replacing text reader, so that if that tool is successful, if that student's working with it well, then it's going to be continued into the next year, so that it doesn't go away and they don't try and use something else. So if we have that product name in the IEP with pictures and video and data, then the teacher that's going to have that student next year can view that and is able to kind of get things rolling right away. So we can't stress enough how important it is and how simple it is now. With cell phones, we can take video and pictures and data real quick. It's not like we have to get a whole production crew in there. It's not like we need an hour of video, but just enough so that the person that's going to be working with that student in the future can see what they do successfully and how they do it successfully. That's a real important component for teachers to do. Teachers can also familiarize themselves with the AT students have on their IEP. So, you know, they can go about figuring out what students have on their IEP, what they're going to need to use for next year, and they can spend some time familiarizing themselves with it. It's also important to familiarize themselves with some learning resources, and there's some major helpful learning resources out there right now. There's a listserv that teachers can join. If they go to, it's called the Quiet Listserv, QIAT. If you go to qiat.org, you can access the listserv there, and you can put your email address on there. What's great about this then is you'll get a lot of email every day, but it's people all over the country asking questions about assistive technology, sharing resources about assistive technology. And it's really a big community of folks that are in the education field that work with assistive technology, that are there to answer each other's questions and provide resources. So if you're on this listserv and you run into an issue when the next school year starts, you can ask your AT folks, your AT team in your AEA, or you can just plug it. You can send email to Quiet Listserv, and you're probably going to get 10 to 15 responses on things you can do or tools that you can try or things like that. So that's a really important listserv to join, and it stands for the Quality Indicators in Assistive Technology. And anybody who's anybody in AT education is on that list. It's a great resource to utilize. Another one, if you're in Iowa, there's a website called Atomic Learning. Atomic Learning has all kinds of different resources on learning, different videos on different tools, and the AEA has a contract with them, so that we have a subscription to this right now. Any Iowa school can use this. You need to find out the name and password from your school or your AEA, and you can get on there. And the reason I bring this up too is there's a whole section on assistive technology and Atomic Learning. So there are webinars or little videos that you can view on just about any tool that you can think of that you might have in the school. And they can be as detailed as you want or as minimal as you want. You can go through and watch these videos and see how an AT tool works. So getting to know Atomic Learning and finding out what your name and password for your school or your AEA is really important, because there's a wealth of information on there that can really help you understand the AT your students are using a little bit better. You know, another thing that teachers can do to get ready for next year is create a low-tech toolbox for the classroom. There are things out there that are sold called Lottie kits that are sold as, and that's L-O-T-T-I-E. Those are sold as low-tech assistive technology kits. Really, all it is somebody basically went to an office supply store and bought some things that could be low-tech and put it in there. And this is the kind of stuff that you'd see in there. Rulers with large numbers for kids with visual impairments, dry erase boards for kids that might struggle with communicating, highlighters for kids that might struggle organizing, rubber stamps for kids that can't hold a pencil and write so that they could grab that a little bit easier to write out spelling words or do short math problems, raised line paper for students that are more tactile, that maybe can't see the lines, that can feel it feel the bump when they draw their pencil over it and know that's where they need to stop. Colored clear folders to help kids with dyslexia get around the photosensitivity that they might have with the fluorescent light shining down on a white sheet of paper with dark text on there. that can be real helpful. We were just talking to a student the other day that uses that as a low-tech tool, and that's one of his most effective assistive technologies. So as we showed in that consideration guide, technology runs from low-tech to high-tech. We can have that low-tech stuff sitting in our room waiting in a box just in case our students need it, and then we can go right to it, pull it out, and use it in the classroom. Other things you might have in there are pencil grips, shelving paper to keep things from moving around on a desk. If a student has a physical disability and might struggle with knocking things off, you can put that box together, a low-tech toolbox together, really quickly and really easily by going to OfficeMax, and pretty inexpensively as well. And then you've got those tools there when a student might need it in the classroom. So that's another thing that teachers can do over the summer. You know, a lot of schools now have mobile devices, iPads in the classroom. Spending some time exploring ways to use mobile tools in the classroom is definitely something that teachers could benefit from as well. Finding apps that they think might work with their students. And a lot of times when we start finding these apps, they become kind of universal design for learning apps that not only can students with disabilities use, but students without disabilities can benefit from those as well. So spending some time learning about mobile devices and what mobile devices can do in the classroom can be real helpful, because it's going to help you use some of those tools that you've got available to you. And here's a website. You can go to apple.com/education/apps, and you can find all kinds of apps and explore different apps that are available for education. Another thing, well, I guess we'll get into this, but teachers can also seek out professional development opportunities, and I'll tell you of one in a minute here. But let's talk about assistive technology professionals for a minute also. What's their role in the whole process? AT professionals in Iowa typically serve several schools. They're people from the AEAs for the most part, although in some of the larger districts there are AT people directly in the district. I know Dubuque has some AT folks in the high school. Des Moines has AT folks, but a lot of times for everybody else, they're part of the AEA. They cover several schools, and they have a limited amount of time dedicated to AT each week. What they do is they're brought in for consultations when school struggles with AT solutions, and they often also develop and provide professional development opportunities for schools. So what can AT professionals do to contribute to the success next year, starting right now as they plan ahead? Well, you know, some of the things they can do is, you know, visit the schools in their area. We said, I'm suggesting that administrators reach out to the AT professionals. AT professionals can reach out to administrators and visit the school and just help the school know who you are, so that they can make the call to you if needed in the next year. Help schools identify what they have. Help in that inventory so that schools understand what's available already. You know, secure your lending library items. Get your lending library items back so that you've got them ready to roll for the next year. And kind of identify based on that and what you've heard schools asking for, what you might need to increase your lending library to be able to provide more options for schools to be able to borrow and use in the upcoming school year. This is also a great time for AT folks to seek out professional development opportunities and learn about the latest in AT, and also develop professional development opportunities for the fall for your schools. If you're an AT professional, you know you have limited time in a lot of schools, and so you need to start doing some capacity building. Make those folks in the schools more aware of AT. Make them able to get a little bit further and only have to call you in if there really is a major issue. And you can do that by doing some trainings, by developing trainings, helping them understand, again, the consideration process, understanding tools that are available, and how to implement them in the classroom. And if you can do that, and you can train some people in the schools, they're going to need less and less of you, and it's going to allow you to focus on some of the more severe cases that you really need to be there for. So creating these opportunities for folks across your schools is going to be helpful, but also seeking out some professional development opportunities of your own is going to be helpful. And I'll show you real quick one of the professional development opportunities that is available through iCater, that's one that we put out. If you go to our website, education.uiowa, let me make sure I spell education right, .edu/iCater. One of the tabs you're going to see here is Summer Institute. If you click on that, you'll see we do 3 two-day Summer Institutes, June 5th and 6th in Bettendorf, June 11th and 12th in Council Bluffs, and July 24th and 25th in Iowa City. Those are 2 days worth of learning about AT, hands-on AT work, learning about some of the topics we've been talking about. It's a great way to come and just spend a couple days learning about assistive technology. So if that's something you'd be interested in, please visit our website and register now as we're getting close to some of those dates here. So that's a good opportunity for professional development learning. Well, we've talked about AT professionals, administrators, and teachers. What can parents do? Parents can kind of explore what's available. They can kind of try and figure out what's available through the school. Identifying free tools that are available can be helpful as well. And we did a whole webinar that's archived on our website on free tools. And if you identify free tools, you can start using those at home. And you can do that by practicing with your students. You can have your student doing things that they might want to do anyway, emailing, surfing the internet, writing, checking social networks. You can have them using assistive technology tools to do that. So really, for a parent, what the summer is all about is exploring options. And talk to your AT folks, talk to people like myself in the AT field. That's going to help broaden your knowledge base. And as a parent, if you have an understanding of what's available, then you can go to the school the next year and you can make requests at the beginning of the year with some basis behind it, having a knowledge of what's available and having tried some free things in your home to help students. There are free tools with Google Chrome for reading. There's free tools on the iPad. But this is the time to educate yourself. Do some Google searches. Go through AT websites like ours, education.uiowa.edu/icater, and find out what's available and look into those tools a little bit more so that you've got some idea of what might be helpful for your son or daughter. Students, what you can do, you need to understand your needs. Students need to, and parents can help them do this. Understand where they struggle. Understand what they need help with. Be proactive. Try some of these free things. Students, utilize what you like doing, social media and YouTube to research AT tools. There's all kinds of videos on YouTube about assistive technology, about tools being used, about what's available. If you understand your needs and say you feel like you struggle with writing, start using YouTube to find tools to help with writing and see what's out there. Talk to some of these professionals, talk to your parents, practice with your current AT, and really spend the summer getting ready for school in the fall, so that when you're ready to go, you're not spending the first month learning a new technology and then falling behind in your work because you've been spending time learning this technology. The summer is the time to do your best work using some of that technology, understanding some of that technology, so that you're ready to use it with the schoolwork when the school year starts. So we've talked about lots of things today. There's all kinds of things that we've mentioned that can be helpful that administrators need to do, that teachers need to do, that AT professionals need to do, that parents need to do, that students need to do. Just some ideas of ways to spend your summer so that when you get to school next year, you're not wasting time trying to figure things out with AT. You know what you're going to use. You know how to use it. Everybody's on the same page, and you can roll from day one using that assistive technology and not get behind in class because you're learning a new tool. With that, I'll open it up for questions. I know there's a few of you here. Do you have any questions? If you have any, please feel free to type them into the chat box here, and I'd be glad to address them. But those are just some ideas of things that you can do for the school year, and I wish everybody a great summer. It's been a blast doing these webinars for you. We're going to try and continue them next year, so if you have ideas for topics you'd want to see, please feel free to email them to me at james-stachowiak@uiowa.edu. Again, I'll hang around for a few minutes to answer any questions anybody might have, and if not, enjoy your summer, and we'll look forward to getting back with you next year.